There is a specific kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. It isn't physical tiredness, though your body feels heavy. It isn't just stress, though your mind is racing. It is a deep spiritual fatigue that comes from a very specific habit, the habit of setting yourself on fire to keep other people warm. We live in a world that praises selflessness. We are told that to be good means to be giving, to be available, to be the one who understands. But for some people, kindness isn't just a virtue. It has become a compulsion, a reflex that happens before you even have a chance to think. You say yes when every cell in your body is screaming no. You absorb other people's emotions until you can't tell where they end and you begin. You apologize for taking up space. And after years of this, you look in the mirror and you don't see a good person. You see a hollow one. If you feel drained by your own goodness, if you feel like your empathy is actually a wound, then this video is for you. Because real kindness was never meant to destroy the person giving it. There is a word that almost never appears in everyday conversation, but quietly shapes the lives of people who are too kind. That word is fawning. Most people grow up learning about 3 stress responses: fight, flight, and freeze. We hear about the person who gets angry, the person who runs away, the person who shuts down. But there is a 4th pattern that often goes unnoticed because from the outside, it looks nice. It looks like the person who smiles when they are uncomfortable, who says, "It's fine, don't worry about it," when something clearly hurts. Who apologizes first, every time, even when they are the one who was wounded. Fawning is what happens when the nervous system decides, if I can keep everyone around me comfortable, then I might be safe. It is not a conscious strategy. It is not a plan written out on paper. It is more like a reflex that lives in the bones. Someone raises their voice, and before the mind has even finished processing the words, the mouth has already said, "You're right, I'm sorry." A small boundary is crossed, and the body flinches on the inside, but the face softens into a smile and says, "No, it's okay, really." From the outside, this can look like kindness. From the inside, it feels like bargaining. Not bargaining for discounts or favors, but bargaining for basic emotional safety. I will be endlessly understanding if you can just not leave. I will carry the awkwardness and the discomfort if you can just not be angry. I will abandon myself if it means you might not abandon me. Many people who are seen as the sweetest person in the room are not walking through life with a heart full of unconditional generosity. They are walking through life with a nervous system that has learned that the safest person to sacrifice is themselves. And here is the painful irony. The world applauds this. At work, it is called being a team player. In families, it is framed as being the good one. In friendships, it is rewarded with, "You're such a good listener. I can tell you anything." In relationships, it is praised as, "You're so low maintenance. You never start drama." No one sees the internal cost. The body that goes home and crashes after a simple conversation. The mind that replays every interaction at 2 a.m., scanning for signs of disapproval. The heart that feels hollow because it never gets to show its true shape. Kindness and fawning may look identical from the outside, but they are made from completely different substances. Kindness is a choice. Fawning rarely feels like one. Kindness says, "I see your humanity, and from my own solid ground, I want to care." Fawning says, "If I take care of you, maybe you won't become dangerous to me." One comes from fullness, the other from fear. And when fear is what fuels the smile, the compliments, the, "Of course, no problem, I don't mind," kindness is no longer a gift. It becomes a survival strategy. People are not born this way. No one comes into the world thinking, if I overfunction for everyone else, maybe I'll be allowed to exist. This pattern usually begins in small, ordinary moments, in houses that might look completely normal from the outside. Sometimes there is obvious chaos. A parent whose anger filled the entire room, arguments that ended with doors slamming, the kind of tension that trained a child's senses to pick up the tiniest shifts in mood. Other times, the story is subtle. A household where emotions were quietly discouraged, where disappointment was met with silence instead of comfort, where love felt slightly conditional. Granted when the child was easy, withdrawn when they were not. In both versions, the child learns a very similar equation. When I am pleasing, things are calmer. When I am quiet, people smile at me. When I am helpful, I am less likely to be punished, ignored, or shamed. It doesn't arrive as a sentence. It arrives as a feeling. The slight relaxation in a parent's shoulders when the child says, "It's okay, I don't mind." The way everyone praises the child who never complains, never causes trouble, never says no. Over time, the nervous system takes notes. It notices that anger gets anger back. It notices that expressing needs sometimes leads to conflict or to a coldness that feels unbearable. But pleasing, smiling, being good, that seems to soften the edges of the adults around them. So the child becomes very good at reading the room. They can tell by the way the keys hit the table, by the rhythm of footsteps in the hall, by the speed of a reply to a text, whether it is safe to bring something up or whether it is better to smooth everything over. They become experts at editing themselves. If they feel hurt, they minimize it. If they feel angry, they turn it into a joke. If they feel lonely, they tell themselves, "At least I'm not causing problems." Maybe you recognize some of this. Being the one who could always be trusted to babysit, to mediate sibling arguments, to cheer up a sad parent, to be the understanding friend, even when you were the one who needed understanding. There is a certain type of child who becomes the family's emotional shock absorber. When tension builds, it is absorbed through their apologies, their flexibility, their ability to say, "It's not a big deal, really. I'm fine." On the surface, they become the pride of the family, so mature, so wise, so kind for their age. Inside, something very quiet starts to happen. They stop asking, "What do I need?" and start asking, "What version of me keeps everyone else okay?" The tragedy is that this is often invisible. Teachers praise them. Relatives call them an angel. Friends lean on them. No one pulls them aside and says, "You shouldn't have to work this hard just to feel allowed to be here." So the pattern deepens. The child grows up physically, but inside, the same old rule still hums like background music. I must be easy to love. I must be easy to handle. I must be easy to forgive. By the time this person reaches adulthood, fawning doesn't feel like a strategy. It feels like a personality. It's just who I am. I like being there for people. I just hate conflict. I'm naturally selfless. Underneath these sentences, there is often a quieter truth. At some point in my life, being good became the safest place to hide. From the outside, it might look like this way of living works. The person who always says yes has plenty of friends. They are rarely alone on a Friday night. Their phone buzzes with messages that begin with, "Hey, can I vent for a second?" Or, "You're the only one I can talk to about this." In group photos, they are there. In other people's stories, they show up as the reliable one, the patient one, the one I can always count on. But every survival strategy sends a bill. For some people, the cost shows up as physical exhaustion, waking up tired, falling asleep drained, carrying a kind of heaviness in the body that no amount of sleep fully cures. For others, it shows up in quieter ways, a persistent feeling of emptiness after social interactions, as if they left a part of themselves behind in every conversation. An invisible soreness that builds up after each small self-betrayal. One of the clearest signs appears as resentment, not the loud, explosive kind, but a slow, bitter sediment that settles at the bottom of the heart. It might appear after staying late to help a coworker, then realizing they never offer the same in return. It might appear after listening for an hour to someone's problems, then noticing that when you speak, the topic changes after 2 minutes. It might appear in relationships where you constantly make space for the other person's preferences, moods, and dreams. And one day you realize they never asked, "Okay, but what about you?" Resentment, in this context, is not proof that you are ungrateful or secretly cruel. It is a measurement. It is the emotional bruising that appears when one person keeps giving far beyond what their body, mind, and spirit can sustainably offer. If kindness is a river, resentment is what appears when the river has been diverted away from your own soil for too long. Over time, the symptoms stack up. You might notice that you are strangely sensitive to small signs of disapproval, a delayed reply, a short message, a change in tone. Because beneath the surface, the stakes still feel high. If they are unhappy, it must mean I failed them. And if I failed them, maybe they will leave. So the nervous system responds by pushing even harder. You become more available, more flexible, more understanding, even as a part of you silently whispers, "I can't keep doing this." Sometimes the cost shows up as confusion about identity. When someone asks, "What do you like?" there is a long pause, because you are used to liking whatever makes other people comfortable. When someone asks, "What do you want?" the mind goes blank, then immediately starts scanning for what answer would be easiest for them to hear. Life becomes a series of roles: the supportive partner, the accommodating friend, the dependable employee. Meanwhile, the authentic self becomes a faint outline, hard to see, harder to touch. There is also the cost of invisibility. People around you may genuinely think that you don't have strong preferences, that you are just chill, that you never get upset. So they lean on you more. Not always out of malice, but because they have come to believe the story that you are endlessly okay. They don't see the nights where you stare at the ceiling, thinking about the things you wanted to say but didn't, the anger that you swallow so often that it begins to taste like you. In some lives, the cost eventually becomes burnout, not just from work, but from being alive in the way you have been living. Answering a simple message feels heavy. Getting dressed to meet someone feels like wading through mud. The idea of one more conversation where you are the listener, the comforter, the supportive presence feels almost intolerable. And yet, even in the middle of this exhaustion, there can be a cruel inner voice that says, "You're being dramatic. Other people have it worse. You should be grateful." So the cycle continues: over-giving, over-understanding, over-apologizing, followed by quiet resentment, quiet exhaustion, quiet grief. If any of this feels uncomfortably accurate, it is not a sign that you are broken. It is a sign that your kindness has been carrying far more than it was ever meant to hold. A sign that what looks, on the surface, like being nice, might actually be a very old, very loyal part of you, still trying to keep you safe in all the ways it once had to. And beneath the tiredness, beneath the hollow feeling, beneath the resentment you wish you didn't feel, there is something else waiting, patiently, to be acknowledged. The simple human truth that your needs were never meant to be the only ones left outside the door. So, where does this leave us? The world will tell you to just set boundaries. They will tell you to just say no. But if it were that simple, you would have done it years ago. You didn't lack the willpower. You lacked the safety. Your fawning, your overgiving, your exhaustion. None of this was a mistake. It was a survival strategy. It was the only way a sensitive child knew how to secure love in a fragile environment. You were not weak. You were adaptable. You became exactly who you needed to be to survive your history. But the history is over. And perhaps the healing isn't about learning how to say no. It is simply about realizing that you finally have the right to. You have the right to be difficult. You have the right to be unavailable. You have the right to disappoint people. Because the people who really love you, they are not loving you for what you give them. They are loving you for who you are. And if you stop pouring, if you stop performing, and just sit there, empty and tired, you will find that you are still worthy of love. You do not need to earn your place here anymore. You just have to occupy it.